Hi, my name is Jim Denning, and I wrote the book Make It to Midnight, Learning to Live When You Want to Die. I am a licensed professional counselor in San Antonio, and today I want to talk about something that's I'm kind of seeing a pattern the past few weeks. People will come in and they've got either depression or anxiety, usually anxiety. Sometimes it'll manifest itself as eating disorders, and what it's around is being very, very concerned what other people think. And I get that a lot where people will come in and it's like, their friends will tell them, well, why do you care what other people think? Well, stop caring what other people think. But they can't. That's I think the most annoying thing about being either having depression and anxiety or being a counselor is people will just say, well, just don't worry about it. Well, just, think happy thoughts. Well, just get over it. And it doesn't work that way. And hopefully today I'm going to explain a little bit of why a lot of people get really anxious around what other people think. So we're going to start with the brain, as we usually do. This is the human brain from the 50,000 foot view. And it is basically, we have your thinking brain here. So this is your human brain, everything that makes you you, everything that is, personality, sense of humor, intellect, all of those things reside in here. All of the emotions reside in here. Now, it's not that neat and clean cut, but for our purposes, that's what we're going to work with. So your emotional brain is here and your thinking brain is here. Now, the important thing to understand about the thinking brain and the emotional brain is the emotional brain reacts 10 times faster than the thinking brain. So why is that important? Let's say that you embarrass yourself, do something embarrassing in the context of you care what other people think. You do something embarrassing, you will have the rush of adrenaline and the racing heart rate before this part of your brain realizes what's going on. The problem with that is if it's embarrassing and you get that rush of adrenaline and that rush of cortisol and the anxiety kicks on, by the time your thinking brain is engaged, you're already along for the ride. So we see this play out and how this gets created. Human beings naturally, when they do something, they look around to see what the reaction is from other people. So when you're a little kid, you're 3 or 4 years old and you stack some blocks and you make a drawing, the first thing you do is run to your parents like, hey, look what I did. You're looking for that reciprocal validation. Now, imagine if growing up, either you were ignored or the response was unpredictable or the response was negative or the response was mean, anything like that. So, you're a little kid and you make a drawing and the first time you go to mommy, you're like, Mommy, look at this. And she's like, oh my God, that's great. Then the second time you go to her and maybe she's had a bad day, maybe she's been drinking, maybe things are different. The second time she yells at you. The third time she tells you to go away and ignores you. And then the fourth time she's happy again. You're going to have a hard time grasping because that's how we calibrate. That's how human beings calibrate from birth till 25 years old is we do a thing and then we look around for the reaction and then we adjust our behavior accordingly. Well, if our intention is a good thing, we reach out for a hug, but the hug is rejected, or we reach out in love, but the love is not reciprocated, or we, God forbid, end up with a narcissist, either as our parents or partner, and everything we do is wrong, there's gonna generate a lot of anxiety around that because that's how we calibrate our brain. So if no matter what we attempt, it turns out wrong, we're gonna be afraid to attempt anything. That's where anxiety comes from. For a lot of people, that's why when they say, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to go outside, because when they go outside, what they intend and what is received are very different things. And if you can't get a good grasp on that, you're labeled as socially awkward. And then when you're socially awkward, they get that weird vibe around you. And it's all just builds and grows on itself. Sadly, we have a very good clear-cut example of this. I'm not, some of y'all may not be old enough to remember Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber. And Ted Kaczynski was a guy who lived in the woods of Montana in a little 10-by-10 shack and would send mail bombs to professors and executives and things like that. Well, what's not commonly known and not commonly taught is Ted Kaczynski was created. So Ted Kaczynski graduated high school at 15 years old, highest IQ probably in the United States. At least it's 167, which is considerably high. He attended Harvard at 16. He participated in a study from 1959 to 1962 conducted by a man named Henry A. Murray. So what the study was they brought Ted Kaczynski in, this, from all accounts, a normal, just very intelligent, normal 16-year-old kid. They brought him in and they said, hey, Ted, you're the smartest guy in the world. We want to know what you think about things. So Ted writes essays and reports and, does research and things, and he turns it into Henry A. Murray. Well, what happens next is Henry A. Murray gets some Harvard Law graduate students to tear apart and berate 16, 17, 18-year-old Ted Kaczynski. So for 200 hours, they subjected him to verbal and psychological abuse. After he did that, he became a math instructor in Berkeley in 1967. He moved to Montana in 1972 and started sending out bombs. He killed 3 people and injured 24. I actually have the study right here, and I'm reading it now. And it's very fascinating because in this study, Henry A. Murray does not refer to the participants of the study as people. He refers to the participants in the study as the organisms. The organisms did this. The organisms did that. We abuse the organism this way. He writes in there's a chapter, he says that he did an experiment where he would intentionally frighten children to see how they reacted to different pictures. So Henry A. Murray was a special guy, we'll say. But the point is, if you have anxiety, if you are very concerned about what other people think about you, think about your childhood and your past. Think about how when you reached out to people in love and kindness, was it returned or was it rejected? Were your parents addicts or narcissists, for where you might have been ignored or neglected or abused or yelled at, or was there a lot of fighting? Were you able to successfully calibrate your actions with other people's responses? Because that's how we get around in the world. I know with me it was, I felt, I called it imposter, well, everybody calls it imposter syndrome, but it's imposter syndrome, where you think you're faking it through life and you're praying that nobody else finds out. I remember I would go to movies or concerts, and I would always sit at the ends because if I had to get up and go to the bathroom or something like that, I didn't want to bother anybody. I wanted to disappear. And that's where I see some of the people with the eating disorders, where they have this, no matter what they do is wrong, they just want to make themselves as small as possible, as invisible as possible. They just want to fade into the background. They don't want to be open and loud. And the problem is they'll have friends or acquaintances that didn't grow up this way. And so they'll say, well, why do you care what other people think? And it's a survival instinct, because for millions of years, if you weren't part of the tribe and you were out on your own, you'd die. You needed the tribe to survive. So if you have anxiety about feeling rejected and things like that, that's normal. Now, the way to work on it, the way to help it, is to very gradually and slowly kind of start pushing those boundaries a little bit. So for me, like I said, when I would go to concerts and things like that, I would always sit at the ends so I could slip out, if I had to get up for some reason. Well, I started moving toward the middle. I'd get the seat 3 or 4 in, and then I'd get the seat toward the middle. And finally, I was at a Tom Morello concert in Austin, and had to get up, and I was right in the middle. And I walked up and, just excused myself kindly. But then I look back and I'm like, I didn't freak out about that. I didn't even think about it. So I write in the book a chapter about, fake it till you make it, which is not a thing. There is no faking it till you make it. You don't go to a university and plop yourself down on the front steps and then wait 4 years and then somebody comes up and like, here's your diploma. Everything has to be a plan. Everything has to be very methodically planned out. And with us, people who suffer with this anxiety and depression, these things have to be socialized. They have to be socialized in very slowly. So if you have something where you're concerned about what other people think, find a way to just push the boundary just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. Maybe decide for a 24-hour period that you're not going to say yes to things. Or that you're not going to apologize. Maybe that's a better one. Just say, hey, for the next 24 hours, unless I do something really egregious, I'm not going to apologize. Because that seems to be a hallmark of this is, if somebody says anything, the first thing out of our mouths is, oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe just, for a day, say, I'm just consciously not going to apologize unless you bump into somebody or, something where you really need to apologize. But don't let it be the first thing that comes out of your mouth. So anyway, this is this is a thing that's common. This is a thing that's normal for a lot of people, unfortunately, especially people who've experienced neglect or abuse or trauma, to where we automatically blame ourselves for what happened because if we hadn't been there, if we hadn't done a certain thing, when I got in my car wreck a few years ago, well, if I hadn't gone on I-10, I wouldn't have gotten a hit. No, it's not that. We live our lives. We can't live our lives that way. We have to live our lives doing what we do, and hopefully it works out. But when it doesn't, we can learn to accept it. So anyway, hope this video helps a little bit. See y'all later.